Hey, welcome to another top 10 best beers of the year list from me, Chad of Chad's Beer Reviews. 2015 was actually a really good year. I reviewed more beers in 2015 than all the previous 7 or 8 years since I've been doing Chad's Beer Reviews. And actually the median score, the average score was actually higher in 2015 than any other year. I think that's has a lot to do with the fact that I pretty much drank like every macro by now, so there weren't too many to review to bring down the average. And but yeah, a lot of good beers this year. Just gonna run down the rules. This is the same. If this is your first year seeing this, it's not the top 10 best beers that were released in 2015, although some of these beers were. It's the top 10 beers that I reviewed for the first time in 2015. So re-reviews don't count. Things like that. Beer could have been around for years. I'm just trying it now. It's eligible for the list. All right. So, with no further ado, let's get on to it. Number 10, Two Roads Road to Ruin. There's definitely a New England style double IPA bandwagon that every brewery in the Northeast has been jumping on the last few years. I don't mind the derivativeness, if that's a word, of these beers, since most of them tend to be somewhere between good and excellent. Once in a while, you encounter an outstanding example of the style, like Two Roads Road to Ruin Double IPA. This has pretty much everything I want in the style. Great taste, amazing drinkability, affordably priced, and available in a can. It's a great substitute for Heady Topper. Alright, number 9, Boulevard Dark Truth Stout. When I think Imperial Stout, I think of a palate just like the one here. There's a lot going on. It's both sweet and remarkably bitter. Strong dark chocolate flavors throughout, akin to chocolate or German chocolate cake. Roasted malt is prominent as well, as it helps bridge the gap between the sweet dark maltiness and the fairly intense bitterness that emerges on the apex. There's a slightly burnt toast flavor, though more of a spicy bitterness, likely due to the hops. On the finish, I get a lovely dark fruit sensation, as only then does the Belgian yeast become apparent in the palate. The alcohol adds a light vanilla sensation and is not distracting at all. Number 8, Peak Organic Superfresh. I don't get too hung up on styles unless I'm actually judging a BJCP event. I'm not sure if this beer really qualifies as a Pilsner, considering how it's a big beer at 7.6%, and it's also clearly a hop bomb. It's probably better considered an IPL or double IPL, though I'll let the style nerds debate that. What it is a highly hopped, extremely tasty, and delectable brew. Slight grassy notes to open the palate with a subtle, juicy flavor lurking underneath. At the peak of the swig, there's a spicy herbal note with mild flavors of oregano or basil. The back end is remarkably sweet with a taste akin to an energy drink. The aftertaste is all the spice rack flavors, grassy, spicy, herbal, and dry bitterness that lingers. Obviously the hops are the star of the show here, and I don't get much in the way of malt distinctiveness. I'll bet some rye would complement the palate perfectly. Number 7, New England 668, the neighbor of the beast. Sometimes I think American breweries actually out-Belgian Belgian breweries, meaning they take all the things that make a Belgian beer great and go even further with it. This beer definitely has a familiar palate akin to Duvel, Le Choux, for plenty of other great Belgian beers of that general style. Though not a triple per se, it does have a lot of spiciness to the taste. The yeast esters give it a sweet banana flavor in the front and finish with a strong peppery sensation akin to white peppercorn or even table black pepper. Other spices and fruits can be found lingering in the background from start to finish, especially peach and coriander. The palate never gets old or tired. It's as delectable on the last sip as it is on the first swig. That's what I call a great tasting beer. Number 6, Night Shift Whirlpool. Now that the session IPA style has taken the world by storm, there are a lot of, quote, extra pale ales, which are attempting to be the pale ale equivalent. Lots of hops, but not ridiculously bitter. This beer is a great example of where and how to draw the line. Hops absolutely do dominate everything here, but they're so tasty that I don't mind. Just like the aroma, the taste begins with a lush tropical fruit juice sensation. It transitions almost on a dime into a bit dank, grassy herbal hops, a common characteristic found in New England style IPAs. I guess this is a New England style pale ale. A gentle but firm bitterness due mostly to the dry, spicy nature of the hops rather than the raw alpha acids. Not much in the way of malt character, which I don't mind because the hop flavors are so delectable. Number 5, Fuller's Vintage Ale, the 2014 edition. Strong British ales tend to have many of the same flavors as strong Belgian ales, but somehow they're different. Consider that the palate here consists of nuanced fruit notes of cherry, plum, prune, and even strawberry notes, It'd be easy to compare that to a Belgian quad, yet the British yeast gives it a completely different character than the Belgian yeast. Instead of being spicy, it's more refined, calm, and confectionery-like. Notes of caramel and treacle can be found, though I would not describe it as sickly sweet at all. Even the hops are rather prominent, imparting a light citrusy flavor with a significant bitterness to match. For such a strong beer, the alcohol is nearly invisible. It does not distract from the base brew. Number 4, Treehouse Green. It's brewed very much in the New England style IPA, which is trendy and popular now. I don't mind if a beer is trendy as long as it's good. In the case of green, it most definitely is. There's definitely a difference between a highly hop beer and a beer that's hopped with finesse and style, and this is a great example of that. The citrusy, tropical fruit aromas carry over to the palate perfectly. Almost sweet or even tart at first with pineapple and orange flavors, but it's also significantly bitter, juicy up front but more grassy and herbal spiciness on the finish. The ability to make that transition is what separates the good IPAs from the great ones. Not much in the way of distinct malt character other than general pale base. That's okay because the final product is so delicious and enjoyable. I don't even mind that it's not perfectly balanced. Number 3, Founder's Backwoods Bastard. Scotch ales tend to be big, but Founder's Backwoods Bastard may be the biggest of them all, weighing in at 11.6% ABV, the 2015 edition that is, and aged in bourbon barrels. It's safe to say this is a beastly brew. Though for such a behemoth, it's remarkably tame. The palate is delicious, and the delivery is smooth and warming. In a world obsessed with imperial stouts and IPAs, this is a hidden gem in your local beer store. Every once in a while, I have a beer from a style I don't usually think of as being among my favorites, and it'll amaze me. This is one of those brews. The palate is simply delicious, sweet to be sure, but nothing artificial even remotely cloying about it, much like the nose. The taste is largely dark fruit, rum-soaked raisins, cherries, and figs, along with confectionery sweetness of caramel and toffee. The bourbon emerges on the finish in the form of both a sweet, oaky vanilla sensation as well as alcohol. Though not especially bitter, it doesn't come off as unbalanced or hot. This may be the best Scotch ale I've ever had, though it might also be considered an old ale since it's aged in bourbon barrels. Perhaps it's the best of both worlds. Number 2, Hebrew Bittersweet Lenny's RIPA on rye. Barrel aging is something usually associated with stouts and other dark brews, but this shows a strong IPA can be benefited from the technique just as well. Though I'm not sure you know this was an imperial IPA from the palate, as the rich malty sweetness and spiciness from the rye dominate. They create for a delicious blend of fruity flavors such as cherry and pomegranate, but also classy spirits of brandy, sherry, and cognac. There's a significant taste of wood and vanilla in the middle, which complements the malt base perfectly. The rye lingers in the background throughout to deliver subtle, yet noticeable, spicy pings on the tongue. It finishes with a fairly strong hop bite, especially of citrus and pine. The Chinook hops are the most dominant. This is what I would consider a perfect tasting beer. Number 1, which is a beer I just had last week, Cigar City Cafe Americano Double Stout. I don't know what it is about imperial stouts and coffee and chocolate, but they seem to be a winning combination. There are only a select few beers I can think of that I like better than Cigar City Cafe Americano Double Stout. And that's probably because they're barrel aged. In fact, you might consider this beer the equivalent of Founder's KBS without the barrel component, and yet it's just as good of a beer. Huge flavors, gorgeous appearance, amazingly drinkable. It's outstanding for sure. You know a beer is awesome when after every swig you find yourself saying, Some beers that only last for the first few sips, but in the case of this, I found myself saying it after every single swig. The palate is familiar but exemplary imperial stout. Up front, there's a rich sweetness of dark fruit, raisin, sour grape, plum, and a general vinous character. Once it hits the apex, it becomes strongly bitter with hops, espresso, and dark chocolate. It's the liquid equivalent of a chocolate-covered espresso bean, which actually is something I tried recently. There's even a subtle citrusy flavor from the hops. It's muted at first, but it really emerges once it warms. Alcohol is a player as well, but it's such a vital part of the taste makeup that I can't imagine this brew would taste as good without it. So yeah, it's complex, robust, and delicious. So that does it for the top 10 best beers of 2015 list. As you can tell, I'm relocated to Florida. That's an orange tree and an entire golf course behind me. So stay tuned, and you can check out the 2015 top 10 worst beers list. So I'll put a link to that in the description, and link to everything is in the description, all the individual reviews and all that stuff. So Hope you had a good 2015. Hope 2016 is even better. And I will see you guys next time. Cheers.